Welcome to this week's episode of the Sports Curious podcast, where we are talking about why you should give a crap about the Major League Baseball playoffs. Now, not everybody's into it's baseball, it's football season, but our boys of summer are rolling into the end of their season, and we are here with our own boy of summer, my co-host, my co-founder, my favorite brother, Scott. Welcome to the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. The boys of summer are ready for fall, ready to compete.
A little fall ball. It gets exciting. The fall is a really busy time for us. We have, baseball playoffs. We have WNBA finals. We have football season. We have the NHL is starting. The NBA is starting. We have college football. Like there is so much happening right now. It is insane.
This is like the best month to be a sports fan. Literally everything you could ever imagine.
Well, let's dive right into talking a little bit about why we should give a crap about the Major League Baseball postseason. There's a lot of great stories in this. So if you are hanging out with baseball fans, we're going to give you a lot of great heads up on icebreakers and things to talk about. But Scott, maybe you can give us a little bit of an overview of the World Series last year and what we can kind of look forward to.
I'd be happy to. If you rewind back to last fall, the Houston Astros beat the Philadelphia Phillies in the World Series. And both teams are in the playoffs again. So the Astros are looking to defend their title. You may recall that they traded for Justin Verlander from the Mets this year. The Mets were a dumpster fire. And of course, he's married to Kate Upton. And they have the legendary manager, Dusty Baker, with all of his wristbands at the helm.
What are the wristbands?
I think they're just good luck.
Okay. So he just like keeps adding them?
Yeah, just add more.
He's like a Power Ranger, basically. Yes, got it. Dusty Baker, the Power Ranger. Yes. So to give everyone sort of the same baseline, 12 teams make the Major League Baseball playoffs. There are 30 teams. There are 3 division winners and 3 wild card winners from each league. So we have in the American League, we have the first round byes, which are teams who played really well and ranked our first and second in the playoffs. They will skip the first round of the playoffs and move on to the next. So the number 1 Baltimore Orioles, number 2 ranked Houston Astros. In the National League, we have the number 1 ranked Atlanta Braves, number 2 ranked Los Angeles Dodgers. And then the wild card will go back to American League, Minnesota Twins, Toronto Blue Jays, Tampa Bay Rays, and the Texas Rangers. On the National League side, we have the Milwaukee Brewers, the Arizona Diamondbacks, the Philadelphia Phillies, and the Miami Marlins. All those teams are in the playoffs.
That was impressive.
Well, it's my skill set.
Yeah.
So we can talk a little bit about, we both used to work in baseball. You were at the spring training facility in Tucson for the Diamondbacks, and I worked for the Arizona Diamondbacks for, I think 8 or 9 years at this point. I can't do math. But we had a chance to go to some playoff games with the Diamondbacks. Do you remember when we went to, I think it was 2007-ish? We went to a game in Colorado when you were at school there?
I do. That was, if you remember, it was the middle of Rocktober, which was when the Rockies went on this incredible run just to make the playoffs. And then they just kept winning and kept winning. And I was in school in Colorado, and I think I was the only Diamondbacks fan in the entire state. So it was a pretty miserable experience for me.
Well, the game itself, if you remember, was pretty miserable. It was freezing. It was raining.
Do you
remember that?
Some snow flurries as well. Yeah, it was pretty awful. Awful game to go to be honest.
It was brutal. We had fun. I just remember holding the hot chocolate underneath my poncho just so the inside of me stay warm because I was soaking wet through and through. But I do believe it was the same series that I went to a game the next night and the Diamondbacks ended up getting swept by the Rockies. But so we sat in sort of the family section. They take all the team, the staff who came with the team and the families, their wives and their kids were all sort of in one same section. And we were over by third base. And of course we weren't playing that great and we were about to get swept. And as sort of the game started winding down, right, and you realize that this might not work out so well with us, Rockies fans were shoving brooms in the face of people in our section. They knew that it was the family section for the opposing team. We were lined on the side by security guards, and Rockies fans were throwing things. They were sticking brooms in our faces. They were yelling at people's children. I'm sorry, Rockies fans, that does not give me the most loving feelings for you all. But I mean, it was to the point where that last out, they hustled every single one of us out of there and instantly onto a bus. I mean, it was one of those like, everybody out, let's go.
Okay.
Because it was so bad.
That's disappointing to hear. Not great
I know
sportsmanship.
you don't, yeah. And you don't think about, these as Americans tend to do. You yell things, you harass things we didn't see when we went to a baseball game in Japan, but there's their families, their children are there. There were like babies and
Hmm.
toddlers and people are yelling swear words about their fathers. And it was a whole experience that I mean, I was glad I got a chance to do it, but it was definitely a vibe that I don't really need to revisit.
Just get out of there is the best thing you can do.
That's exactly they were like, all
Yep.
right, wheels
Let's
up,
go.
everybody out of
Let's
here.
go. And it was probably
So
cold too, so it was okay to
it
get out
was
of
it
there.
was totally fine to get the
Yeah.
heck out of there. We're from Arizona. We don't know how to be cold. That's how that works. Okay, so let's talk about this year's World Series and this year's playoffs. We have three really like key storylines that you and I have identified that we should really pay attention to. And that first one I want to talk a little bit about is the Miami Marlins. So the Miami Marlins are back in the playoffs for the first time in 20 years, but it's their first time with Kim Ng, their general manager, who's the first female general manager in the history of Major League Baseball. Let's talk a little bit about Kim and the Marlins.
First, I'll say that they've been in the playoffs 4 times and they've won the World Series twice. So
That must be a typo in my notes.
no, I think the one time they made the playoffs was the 2020 season, so it was kind of a weird deal. But so 4 times in the playoffs, 2 World Series victories, so they're kind of all in, or they just dumpster fire and sell everybody and get rid of the team.
Sounds right.
So Kim, it looks like she's got the team, some female perspective on the team. Looks like it's actually going really well. She's got a pretty good squad going, and I think she's kind of changed the franchise since Mr. Jeter sold it.
So Derek Jeter, for those of you familiar, played for the Yankees for a long time, was the CEO of the Marlins as well as an owner. And in February 2022, he sold, I think, for right around $45 million his stake in the team. And one cool thing about this is that the Marlins are the only team in men's U.S. team sports history that have both women atop their business and their on-field operations positions. I think that's pretty cool.
It's pretty incredible. It's fairly obvious that these women know what they're doing, and that it sets a great precedent for any women looking to get into the business or any women that are already in the business, that they've proved themselves that they know baseball, they know how to construct a roster.
Yeah, it's really neat. I actually read somewhere according to Sports Business Journal, Major League Baseball entered the season with a record 25 women in the C-suite at the club level, which is really neat to see. It's neat to see that growth and see these teams succeed because if I remember correctly, the Marlins don't have this massive payroll.
No, they're kind of like I said, when they win the World Series, they dumpster fire and sell everybody off. So they've never really committed to a huge payroll. So it's necessary to have, these smart people like Kim and the other women in the franchise know what they're doing and be able to run it so well.
That's great. Well, that leads us to our second storyline to talk about is just because you have a lot of money doesn't mean you're going to make the playoffs. And we're seeing that with the New York Mets, the New York Yankees, and the San Diego Padres.
Yeah, just because you have money and you throw money at free agents and try to sign everyone who's you think is the best player doesn't necessarily result in wins and team chemistry. And we're looking at what they spent a collective $880 million between those 3 teams on their
That's insane.
rosters, and none of them really came close, unfortunately, for those fans.
Did I miss something? Were there big injuries we needed to be mindful of key players that maybe if we're talking about these three teams, it was like, oh well, so and so got hurt and that's why they didn't make it? Or was it just purely the chemistry? You can't buy chemistry.
I think it was a chemistry thing, maybe a series of unfortunate events, some injuries mixed in, but it was clear it wasn't going to work pretty much with all 3 of these teams basically from the get-go. They never really got hot.
It's
No one really got hot at the same time to get the teams going.
It's really incredible. I remember when you used to take, baseball lessons, one of your coaches, I think, I can't remember who it was, wrote a book about or would talk about how baseball was so much mental.
Hmm.
It was obviously there's a skill set to it, but there's such a big piece of it that's mental, hence why that chemistry is so important.
And if you have big names that don't necessarily buy into team philosophies or listen to the managers, things like that, it's obvious it can have a huge impact on the team. And you see
Yeah,
a lot of
absolutely.
these teams in the playoffs don't have huge, you know, budgets for rosters, and they buy in to the franchise and what the coaches are saying. So it obviously makes a big difference.
Drinking the Kool-Aid
Yes, it
counts.
does.
You know who's also drinking the Kool-Aid, which leads into our third storyline to follow, is the growth of Major League Baseball. Now, we have had discussions in our team meetings, and we've gone hardcore in our interns talking about this, that
Hmm.
baseball has been a challenge lately. It hasn't seemed to grow, and it's a slower sport, therefore it's not capturing the attention of people. They're not quite as good at creating names and social media status and things around their athletes, right? It's not like basketball where you're seeing all these great clips, or football. I mean, God, everyone wishes they had a Taylor Swift show up, right, for their sport. But baseball's growing. Last year, revenue increased 7.8% up to an all-time high of 10.3 billion. The NFL's at 12 billion, in case you're wondering. But you're watching these price tags of these teams go up 12% last year, despite having these regional TV woes. You're seeing attendance increase. I mean, it's really neat to see this growth.
Yeah, I mean, baseball's like you said, we always have trouble with the way they market their players and the lack of really visibility for a lot of them. So it's nice to see that they're kind of maybe catching a younger demographic as, social media takes over and TikTok and things like that. And what do we have? The Yankees, Dodgers, Red Sox, Cubs are all in the top most valuable franchises. So it's definitely reflecting on the bottom line. And unfortunately, we only have one of those teams in the playoffs, which is the Dodgers. So there's some more work to be done, that's for sure.
It's really interesting how that works, right? It goes back to money doesn't buy you
Hmm.
everything. But I mean, we're talking the league topped 70 million people in attendance for the first time since 2017. That's a really big deal. And you have 8 teams that are finishing with attendance of over 3 million people for the first time in 10 years. So whatever they're doing, it's working. People are showing up, people are getting excited. What do you think makes baseball's been doing that makes people show up?
In my opinion, from what I've seen, I was fortunate to go to a few games this year, and I do believe it's got to be the pitch clock. The pace of play has increased tremendously. Like the games are going so quick with the new pitch clock. You can barely get up to go to the bathroom anymore in the middle of the game, and that's what keeps people's attention in this TikTok, Instagram, Twitter society we have now.
Absolutely. We want to be engaged. I mean, we're all watching the Savannah Bananas because they go out and roll out all these antics. And for those of you who don't know what the Savannah Bananas are, they're an independent team, like the Harlem Globetrotters for baseball, if you
Hmm.
will. And they go on and they do all these different antics and dances and have a guy on stilts, et cetera, et cetera. But that's the stuff we're all looking for, right? We're looking to
Hmm.
be entertained. And so a slow paced game isn't it? So it's working, which is really cool. I love to see it. Hey, any growth is good growth for me in this world.
Absolutely. No guys on stilts in the World Series, I don't think, from what I've
No,
seen,
no,
sadly.
probably no one even quite that tall.
No, unfortunately.
No, no one's Randy
No.
Johnson. No. So we're talking about World Series. I get this all the time. Let's talk about why it's called the World Series. They have one baseball team that's based in Canada.
Mhm.
Everybody else is based in the United States. We're not calling it the North American Series or the North American Championship. Why is it called the World Series? What's your take on that?
It seems like such a simple question, but there's really no simple answer, right? I guess I think it dates back to when baseball was predominantly played in America, and then we have all these international players from countries all around the world. So I mean, I guess that's kind of why you're bringing the best of the
I
best
mean,
to play here, and while it may not be every country has a team, they have players in the league. So I don't know if that.
I
Yeah.
mean that's the way I look at it. But it's funny because it's been called the World Series long before you really had this
Hmm.
magnitude of players from all over the world. And so I just thought that was really interesting to think of. They once upon a time, they had 2 Canadian teams. So there was that.
RIP Expos.
RIP Expos. Pour some poutine out for you. So leading into the World Series, obviously you have to start in the beginning with the wild card games. So why are wild card games so wild?
That
No
is
stilts?
also a great question. So prior to 2022, the wild card games were, the 2 teams that didn't win their divisions that made the playoffs, but they played a best of 1 game. It was 1 game to make the playoffs. So I think that was kind of what made things so wild to begin with. So after 162 games, you get 1 game to make the postseason. But
It's very
since
Eminem.
then, things aren't as wild. Now they play a best of 3 series for the teams to advance to the next round. So it's a little less wild.
I'm imagining that's to drive attendance numbers, let's be honest, right?
Yeah, and baseball is such a game of, routine and things like that. So 1 game that means everything doesn't necessarily fit the model that they have with their schedule.
I know, but it's way more fun
It
that
is
way.
more fun for the fans. And everybody likes an elimination game.
Absolutely. I mean, who doesn't want to? I mean, it's crazy when you really think about it. Like you said, it 162 game season. I remember being on the other end of this, going, "There's this 1 game dictates whether you make
Everything.
it or not." You've played 161 games, and this 1 game matters. And I think there's nothing more maddening than that when it really comes down to it, because you're like, "Holy crap! It's been the longest season,"
Yes.
and I mean, it starts in the spring and we go all the way through to the fall. It is a long ass time. And 1 game makes a difference. 1 pitch makes a
Exactly. And I
difference.
think that's what makes the postseason so exciting with baseball, because you go through this long season where if somebody, strikes out or there's an error, it doesn't really have that much impact. But when in the playoffs, everything's amplified. Every pitch, every hit, every throw is just everyone's on the edge of their seat.
Yeah, agreed. So talk to me a little bit about what teams, what players, like give me some predictions here.
Ooh, now we're getting to the juicy stuff.
Now you're getting the good stuff.
And crazy thing about the wild card is that the teams that have the buys, they're off for a week or so. And in baseball, that can throw everything off as far as routine and timing. So I think some of these playoff wildcard teams actually have, a little bit of an advantage going into, because they're playing for the, those few days while the top 4 seeds sit out.
Talk to me real quick while you talk about routine. What do you mean routine? Like what are we, for the person who doesn't understand what players go through, what is that routine that's getting messed up?
I mean, like you said, the 162 game season, you're playing every day, every other day most of the time. So you have this set routine, batting practice, you throw your bullpens if you're a pitcher, you work out at a certain time, and that kind of gets thrown off when you have a week off. You'll see it with the All-Star break in the summer. They take about a week off and guys come back, and it takes them a while to get back in routine of, seeing pitches and throwing strikes. It just takes so much monotonous work.
So who should we be watching for? Who do we think will be at the end?
All right, we'll start National League first. The Braves are the number 1 seed, and I have no reason, unfortunately, to believe that anyone's going to upset them in the National League. They've been dominant all year. Ronald Acuna Jr., he's kind of their superstar. He missed the World Series when they won in 2021 with an injury, and he's had this unreal season he's the only person to ever hit 40 home runs, steal 70 bases. He's electric. He's going to bat flip. He's going to celebrate. He's going to have fun out there. So it's kind of what the MLB needs to get behind to market someone for the younger
Excitement,
generation.
absolutely.
So sorry, National League. I think Braves are kind of probably going to take it.
All right. And what about on the American League side?
American League side, Orioles are the number 1 seed. They are kind of the underdog, even though they're the number 1 seed. They've been painfully building through the draft for a few years. They're 2 years removed from a 100-loss season. So their fans are definitely excited for this. They've got a ton of young talent. but the young talent doesn't necessarily translate to the postseason. Sometimes you need those veteran leaderships with playoff experience. So I'm pretty sure the Astros are probably going to come through again.
Oh, that'll be interesting. Yeah, both the Orioles and the Diamondbacks lost 110 games just in the last 2 years.
Yeah, so
just 2 years ago, I mean. So, I mean, that is pretty crazy.
And yeah, these fan bases they've been through a lot to see their teams get to this point. So I think America is probably going to get behind the Orioles as they go through. Hopefully they keep advancing so you can see these, this young talent they've acquired keep going.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's fun to just, we all love an underdog. Now there's no designated hitter. That's a thing that went away in 2022. Both teams now both leagues have a designated hitter now. Mm-hmm. Any other things? What do you want to leave us with? What's our one takeaway that we have not talked about before we go?
Ooh, that's a good one. I mean, we talked about the pitch clock. Can we go into that real quick?
Sure, go for it.
Pitch clock has sped up the game remarkably, and that's, I think, led to a lot of attendance and viewership. And for those who don't know, the pitch clock, with nobody on base, the pitcher has 15 seconds to pitch the ball once he gets it back. And then with somebody on base, he has 20 seconds. So it's fast.
And that's been your game changer.
Yeah, it's tough to go get a drink or go to the restroom in between pitches anymore, or in between innings.
That's why you just get the beer guy, or you watch it at your house.
That's true. And one more thing.
Yes.
The thing that makes pitch clock so much easier is pitch calm. I think we've discussed this previously on some other podcasts. But to make things more efficient calling pitches and to prevent other teams from stealing your signals, catcher, pitcher, shortstop, and usually center field have an earpiece where the catcher is calling the pitches rather than give, a bunch of signals. So it's more efficient.
And does that allow the Astros to not cheat by banging on a trash can?
People may have other ways to cheat, but it makes it a lot harder. So you're not just just relaying finger signals anymore. So you got to get pretty high tech with your cheating ability.
They're not able to pick it up. That's okay. That makes sense. Yeah. That makes sense. So the first round, the wild card starts on Tuesday, October 3rd, and runs through Thursday. And then we have all the way through the World Series, which begins on October 27th and could continue to a Game 7 on November 4th. So remind me, we have the wild card is best of 3, then it goes best of 5.
And there should be a best of 7 as well.
And then best of 7, and then best of 7. Okay.
A lot of games.
So hang in there. It's a lot of games, but it's a lot of fun. And as we mentioned before, it really does. Every pitch does make a difference. And it's really crazy how that works. So obviously we've given you sort of a high level of what you can expect during the MLB playoffs. If you have questions, you know where to find us. We're on social, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram. You can find us, DM us. We'd be happy to fill you in. Thanks for wearing your swag today, Scott. I wore my new Superfan sweatshirt in my ASU colors today. You've got your Sports Are for Everyone shirt on.
Can we see it?
The best part about these Superfan shirts are no matter what school you went to or what team you cheer for, we probably have your color. So you can just wear a generic shirt if you want to with a great color that makes it just easy. So I've got my Arizona State shirt on, gotta represent. So anything else you want to, before we head off from the home run of a podcast?
I think that's a grand slam of a podcast.
How many other bad baseball terms can we put in before the end?
Probably a lot if you really want to go down that.
Probably a lot. Well, thanks for pinch hitting today. Actually, you weren't pinch hitting. You're always here. So you're really just a designated hitter. Thanks for being here today, hitting from both sides of the plate. What else can we drop in? That's where we're at. Anyone have any questions? Let us know. And we're here every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. With Wednesday is always our longer form with Scott, where we dive into some great topics. We have some great Halloween ones coming up. And of course, follow us on Instagram because we're talking about Fat Bear Week this week too, which is also America's favorite holiday.
The best week.
Best week ever. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.